All right, now in this video, we are going to make sure that we fully understand what John Maynard Keynes was actually talking about when he talked about spare capacity. Okay? Because if you don't understand the difference between the neoclassical model and the Keynesian model, and you don't understand this idea of spare capacity, then you can't really fully compare the two, okay? Because the fact that John Maynard Keynes was looking at a post-industrialized England, as opposed to Adam Smith, who was Scottish, who was taking a look at industrial revolution as it was taking off in England, like that creates some major differences. And the way in which the supply curves operate and the way they're drawn really changes the analysis and evaluation that you're going to have to do as a student, okay? So go with me on this. Follow this little story, and it's a little story of Keynesian logic understood through the silly story of a young couple, and we're going to call them Mark and Margaret, okay? Mark is my sister. No, Mark is not my sister. Margaret is my sister. Mark is my brother-in-law. And this is Keynesian theory based on a young couple falling in love and growing and having a family. Okay, so Keynesian theory is all based on the notion that spare capacity has already been built up in the economy. All right, here we go. Now look, here it is. The story of a young couple named Mark and Margaret. There they are. They're in love. And it's all about the buildup of spare capacity. Look at Mark. Oh, look at Margaret. Oh, look at how beautiful they are together. They've just gotten married. They've built their new home. And it has a beautiful red roof and yellow walls and a yellow outside windows. And all of a sudden, guess what? Wow! Congratulations! Mark and Margaret had their first child, and it's a girl! And as a result of having their first child, what did they have to do? They had to expand their house to build a room for their new daughter. And there it is, right there. Look how happy she is. Yay! Look how happy Mark and Margaret are. Yay! And in fact, they're so happy that they had another child, right? And because they had a second child, wow, what did they have to do? They had to expand their house out to create another bedroom for their second girl. Look, they have two girls. I know they look like twins, but they're actually not twins. And there you have it. You have Mark and Margaret's house that has expanded to include one bedroom over here, one bedroom over there. And then what happened as time went by, you guessed it, boom! They had another child. So they expanded their economy. They spent the money they needed to do. They expanded their house, and they built a second floor for their third child right over top of the first bedroom of their first child. And they had to do some major renovations, which cost them a lot of money, on the red roof over here. I know it kind of looks like this child's being rained on, but we'll cover them up in a second. Don't worry. But now Mark and Margaret have expanded their house to have 4 bedrooms, one for them and one for their 3 beautiful children. And as time goes by, what happens? Mark and Margaret have another child. And as a result of having another child, they have to put on another addition to their house. They use all of the factors of production that they need, the costs that they need in order to build up that 4th bedroom. And there they are, a cute and happy family of 6. Mark, Margaret, child 1, 2, 3, and 4, 3 and 4. And guess what? They're all girls. Oh, how cute! But as time goes by, what happens? They grow up. Mark and Margaret, even though they look like they're saying the same age because they age well, the next thing that happens is, what happens? Their first child goes off to university. Yay! They're so excited. Their first child got into the university of her choice and she's gone. And now they have an empty room, but they're still happy because they have their 3 youngest children still there until all of a sudden a couple more years goes by and their second child goes off to the university, and now they're developing some spare capacity, my friends, because now they have 2 empty bedrooms. And then as time goes by, you guessed it, the third child goes off to university. Now they have 3 empty bedrooms. And then with time, all of a sudden, Mark and Mark are empty nesters. All of their children have gone off to university. Their oldest has graduated, and now they have 4 huge bedrooms that are unused. And that's okay because Mark and Margaret are still young and vibrant. Look at them. They haven't changed at all. But then guess what happens? All of a sudden, their first child says, "Hey, Mom, Dad, would it be okay if I came back home?" And they said, "Sure, honey, come back. That's no problem." Why? Because they don't have to spend any money to house their daughter when she comes back from university because they already spent the money years ago. This is getting to Keynes. And they have the spare capacity of their household, so she can move right back into the house without any additional costs. Because the house had already been built years before. As they grew as a family, they created all of this infrastructure, and then they had a crash, which just meant kids went off to university. And then when the first one came back, guess what? They have the spare capacity to house her. No problem. And then guess what? The second one comes back and there's room for her too. And the third one comes back and there's room for her too. And the fourth one comes back and there's room for her too. And did Mark and Margaret have to spend any money in order for that to happen? No, not at all. Right? Why? Because during the 20 years that they were raising these children, they spent a bunch of money to create the infrastructure for their children to live happily ever after. Okay, so now, check it. Check it 1, 2. They're back to full capacity, right? Now, what would happen if one of their daughters decides to have a baby and does with her boyfriend, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, they need an extra bedroom? What would happen to Mark and Margaret's costs now? Now they would start to rise, okay? So this is the part of the aggregate supply curve that starts moving upwards, right? As their first daughter has a child, that actually now begins to impact Mark and Margaret's ultimate costs because they're going beyond the capacity they had built up before, okay? And then their second daughter has a child, their third daughter has a child, their fourth daughter has a child, and now all of a sudden, guess what? They've reached a point where there is no more room on the lot where they bought the house. They can't build any more rooms. There's no more space available to them to invest to build more stuff. So they have reached, you guessed it, their full capacity. No more capacity for more building. And now there's no more potential growth. So if this were a Keynes model, now they've entered into that third region, right? Where all of a sudden they're at their full capacity and there is no ability to improve or expand because they're working at their full level of employment or full capacity. Okay? Pretty fascinating stuff. Just imagine that house filling up the whole lot. Okay. So now it's making sense, right? The whole Keynes idea is making sense. Yes, it is. Okay? So what would that look like? Okay. So the way that that would translate to this diagram, that whole little story, would be that, in the beginning, as it's best to draw it this way, right? As they built up capacity, right? As they had more and more children, they were moving along this level, section 1 of the Keynesian curve. And so as they did that, what they were doing, right? They got to, that's terrible. They got to a place right there, okay? And then what happened? Their first daughter went off to school, their second daughter went off to school, their third daughter went off to school, their fourth daughter went off to school. And actually, the demand in their household dropped to there. Okay. And then what? Well, then the first one came back, right? Boom, there. Then the second one came back. Boom, there. Is it costing them any more money? No. Then the third one, is this economic growth? Well, yeah, there's an increase in the number of output in the society. Yeah, but do Mark and Margaret really need to spend more money to house those four daughters again? No. But then all of a sudden, when their first daughter, right, had a baby, then they had to expand the house. And then their third daughter had a baby, and they had to expand it again, right? And the third, and then the fourth, and where did they get? Right there, okay? So, as you can see, that is a great way of explaining how an economy that's industrialized, that builds up over time, like England was in the 1930s, is explainable. Does that make sense? It's the way in which you can understand. The whole metaphor is so that you can understand how it is that you can explain this Keynesian notion of spare capacity in the economy, because what you have to account for is you really have to account for why it is that as the economy grows back after an economic disaster, after there's no more children in the house, why costs don't rise. Because this flat aggregate supply curve means that costs don't rise. This would be PL1, right? Costs don't rise until she has the first child as a baby, second, third, and fourth. Okay? So that's really, really helpful little device you can have. That's why I'd like to tell the story, so that you can understand what it is that you need to do for explaining Keynes. Okay? All right. Now, I hope that helps you understand this, what I think is actually a fairly complex idea, which is the Keynesian philosophy of economic growth, and why it is that when there's an economic recession or a depression, that costs don't rise in the short run, and that's all because of this built-up spare capacity. All right, my friends? There you have it. I hope that made sense. I hope you enjoyed the story, and we are rolling on to the next video.